All right, guys, welcome. I'm live with you here. It just getting started. Had a couple things to do. Had to get Bosman out, and then I fed him. Janet's at an agility trial right now, so I'm flying solo. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the need for corrections in dog training. There's a reason I want to do this because I recently got alerted to a new situation. I'm going to talk about this in a separate podcast altogether, and that is this whole thing that Petco is doing called Stop the Shock. And it's just typical of positive-only training, making an issue where there really is no issue, in stirring the pot when the pot doesn't need to be stirred, in taking away tools that are useful for many, many people. And not only that, I mean, everybody has a right to their opinion. I've got no problem with that. If a trainer is going to tell me they're positive only and that's their way, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's fantastic, actually. The problem I have is when you, as that positive only trainer, then spew your opinion and make it mandatory that others follow that. Right? So in other words, if you believe that the best methodology of training a dog is positive only, and that works for you, then I think that's great. But don't then start to dictate what other people can and can't do based on your experiences and your opinion. That's not fair. So I'm never saying to people that they should use prong collars, that they should use an e-collar, that they should use a chain collar. In fact, I think people should use whatever works for their dog. My only issue, my only concern is that people do what's best by their dog and for their dog. That's really what I'm about. That's really what I believe, and that's really, really important. So the dripping tap, you know why you hear that? It's because every time somebody makes a comment, it does that noise. So I'm gonna actually turn that noise off. And thank you for telling me that. That's very, very good. Good information. I'm going to open it up to questions. And yeah, I want to talk about today. I want to really keep this topic on. This is, by the way, this is not the members only chat. This is a live YouTube chat. So everybody who's here is live on YouTube. The members only chat will start sorry, I'm reading comments here. The members only will start at 1 o'clock, which is in 1 hour. I'm going to stop this about 5 minutes before so I can get reset. So we've got, I don't know how many members we have in here, how many people watching, 150 people or so. Great. I think it's fantastic. It doesn't matter how many people we get. What always happens is afterwards, these videos get viewed and viewed and viewed. And I want to stay on focus today. The focus is the need for corrections in dog training. Now, those of you who know my background know that I really started out in just working with shelter dogs. That was really the only thing I wanted to do. I wanted to help dogs in shelters have a better chance at adoption. I wanted them to have a better, to be made to look better, for people to see the opportunity that this dog could have. So often dogs are overlooked in shelters because they have some rough behavior. They may bark, they may growl, they may lunge, they may play rough, they may do a host of other things. But giving those dogs a sense of structure through corrections can oftentimes really reveal a really, really nice dog, a really, really loving dog, a dog that really deserves a second chance. Now, a lot of times people who don't believe in giving corrections to dogs start out with really nice dogs, you know, Pomeranians, golden retrievers, Labradors, you know, purebred dogs that are cockapoos. That's not a purebred dog, but these dogs that have very little issues, and these dogs can be made whole in their training with the use of positive only training. Remember something. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with positive training. I do positive training. If you watch my videos, you'll see that probably 90% of my training is positive. There is a time when there is a need for corrections. You watch the last few videos I put out, right? Watch the last video I did with this dog, Rio. Watch the video I did with the other dog, Red. These are people who got really strong personality dogs, right? One is an Alano Espanol, one is a Malinois Shepherd mix. And they get these dogs and they believe the hype that positive only training, a clicker and treats, is going to work. And in a lot of ways it does, right? In a lot of ways there is a methodology of, I lost my train of thought, where we want to use corrections with the dog. So sorry, I remember where I was now. People are often afraid and have been shamed by putting a correction on a dog, right? So they pop the collar on a dog, or they, hey, knock it off, or they tap the dog on the butt, or they correct the dog, and people say, oh, you're being rough with your dog. The same nonsense has come into play when kids are running through and I always use this analogy. I know people sometimes criticize me for this, and I don't care. But you know, when a kid is acting like a nutcase in a grocery store and pulling cereal off the shelves, and their mom grabs them by the arm and gives them a swat on the butt, people say, oh, you're abusing the child. And you know, nowadays you actually run the risk of somebody taking your child away from you or reporting you if you do something with your dog to, you know, not social service, but animal services. And animal services usually just overrun, they don't have time for it. But there's that risk. So you're going to get shamed. Somebody's going to do a video and put it up on YouTube and Facebook or these nonsense. You know, I hate social media because this is where all this nonsense starts. All this nonsense starts with shaming and bullying. And you know, for a group of people who are so against bullying and all this stuff, this is really what's going on. So positive only trainers end up bullying these people who are using a balanced training method. Trust me, anybody who abuses a dog, I would be the first person to criticize and stop that behavior. First person. But someone who's giving a dog a correction, somebody who's helping a dog see the light of day, that's a big difference, right? There was a video up a while ago of some guy who really, you know, abused his dog, and you know, and it was like knocking it around. You could tell that he was obviously a moron. But the idea of a strong dog, a dominant dog, a shepherd, a pit, a rot, a mastiff, any stronger dog that might be doing a behavior that's not congruent with civilization. For example, a dog lunging at another dog, a dog lunging at a person, growling at a person, a dog chasing a bicycle, chasing cars, running across the street. Those are all behaviors that are not congruent with civilization. That means they can't survive if they follow through on that behavior. If a dog lunges at another dog and then attacks that dog, that's not really what we want in society. Now, we can say, okay, there's, you know, we can use a treat and kind of lure the dog away, and if it works, fantastic. But when it doesn't work, then you have a problem, right? So when the treat and the click and whatever the technique of the positive trainer would be for that moment, when that doesn't work, then what do we do? And that's the question, right? The question is not to not use positive training. In fact, that is where it should start. You know, my old slogan used to always be, everything with dog training starts with a treat and a toy. Everything. Where it goes from there, that's up to the dog. So in other words, if the dog doesn't take the treat, doesn't take the lure, then we need to take it up to the next level. There's been positive only trainers, who have gone to a client's house, tried to fix the dog, and when it didn't work, their recommendation was euthanasia. They say the dog is too dangerous to survive. Now, there are dogs that I've recommended for euthanasia, but there are a lot fewer than what positive only trainers would recommend because they can't handle the difficult behaviors. Right? Positive only training does not take into account the dog's natural prey drive. And I'm just going to touch on this for a second, that if you have an animal that is a predator, right? And a dog is a predator. That means it will chase, bite, kill, and eat its prey. That's real simple. That's just rudimentary. when that drive, and it's a natural drive, now some dogs don't have it. Jimmy doesn't really have it, right? But when that drive is stimulated and turned on, I promise you, a click and a treat will not dissuade that drive, right? It just will not dissuade that drive. And when it doesn't, you need to have something else to do. That's why a lot of times you'll see positive-only trainers, they'll put their dog in a field, and the dog will sit in the middle of the field, and then you let a chicken go, or a cat go, or a little dog go, and the dog is not capable of holding the stay because the distraction of the dog's predatory drives, the prey drive, is too high. When that is stimulated, something needs to overpower that. That's where corrections come in. That's where a negative, an aversive, a correction, or something must come into play to teach the dog what he needs to know. He must obey, right? No matter how crazy your drive is to do something, there is something keeping you from doing it, right? Let's say you had a crazy drive and you just wanted to jump off of a building and jump into a pool. A lot of people will do that, right? You see that happening all the time, especially guys. Guys are a little bit more nutty than women in this situation. So you'll see guys jumping off of a roof into a pool because it's cool, it's fun. What keeps more people from doing that is the fear of crashing onto the cement. So that is not a dangerous fear. The cement never came up and punched the person in the face, but it's a logical, established fear. If the dog has a fear component that I'm going to get into trouble for doing that behavior, the dog won't act on it. This is where fear is a good thing, right? This is where fear is a positive thing. Now, some people ask questions on, positive punishment, negative punishment, positive rewards, negative, and all that. I'm not even going to address that because as soon as you get into that, you lose people, right? It's too complicated. Negative reinforcement, positive punishment, positive reinforcement, positive punishment. All these words are really designed scientifically to confuse something that's so clear, right? Like I said, healthy fear is a really good thing. You know what healthy fear does? It keeps me from running across the freeway to get to the other side. You know what healthy fear does? It keeps me from going into a biker bar and yelling something out stupid. Those are healthy fears. Healthy fears put onto a dog keep them from running into the street to chase a ball. Healthy fears keep dogs from lunging at another dog because they know that the consequence of following up with that action is not good. And we teach them that through corrections by putting a punishment or an aversive onto the dog. Now, I always differentiate between the word punishment and correction. Punishment is punitive and comes after the fact. So if the dog runs across the street and I grab him and I smack him around and I kick him and I punch him and I spit on him and I throw him on the ground and I do all these crazy things, I'm just talking here, I'm not saying you're going to do that. That is punishment. Correction corrects the dog from doing a wrong. So correction is the dog is about to run into the street and on a collar, a chain collar, a martingale collar, a prong collar, an e-collar, I correct the dog. I create an aversive. I correct the bad before it becomes acted out on. I set the dog up. I prevent the dog from failing. Punishment will come after the dog fails. Corrections will become and will prevent the dog from failing. That's really, really, really imperative that you understand the difference. And that's as simple as it gets, right? Dog training is just the simplest thing in the world. What you do is you create behaviors by luring, shaping, and rewarding them. That's that. You avoid behaviors, you block behaviors by blocking them, by making them not pleasant. If I don't want my dog to do something, I make the act of doing that unpleasant through a correction. It is impossible to teach a dog properly without the use of corrections. Now, some dogs don't need an aversive, but all dogs need corrections. right? A dog must associate a behavior with a end result, right? With a consequence or a reward. All behaviors must be associated with an outcome. If the dog sticks his nose in the food bowl and he tastes poop, it's a negative feeling. It's a negative outcome. If the dog sticks his nose in the bowl and he finds raw meat, he's happy. If a dog runs toward me and I smack him, it's negative. He's not likely to want to repeat that action. If the dog runs toward me and I reward him, he will want to come to me. You must understand, that's the basics of dog training. This is why I always tell people, when you teach a recall to a dog, I mean, I can't think of an easier thing to teach a dog than a recall. All dogs should want to come to you because that's positive. That's very, very positive for the dog. Teaching a dog things more complex, like a send away or scent detection or working away from you, moving away from you, like herding dogs, that's complicated. That's much, much harder to teach a dog. But those are still behaviors we can teach a dog through positive and negative stimulation. Right? Okay, Donald, you asked me a bunch of times how to stop kennel crazing in an animal shelter. I'm not on that topic today, so I can't talk about it. But in short, you know, there's a program called 4 on the Floor, and this, the dog needs stimulation, basically. So keep the questions here on the topic of corrections in dog training. If they're about another topic, I'm just going to overlook them, and it's not fair to everybody who's tuned in now. We have, 250 people. And the reason these people tuned in is because they're wanting to talk about the need for corrections in dog training. And I'm here to tell you that the political climate, I'm not talking about political like the president, I'm talking the political climate currently between positive only and balanced training is so diverse, it's so angry, and it's so punitive. It's becoming, in fact, what these people are accusing balanced trainers of is exactly what they're against, right? They're saying that people are bullying the dogs, are hurting the dogs, are scolding the dogs, are doing negative things to dogs, but yet it's those advocates of positive only training who are then doing this to the people that they're accusing of doing it. These people aren't even doing it. I just did an interview with Enzo and Lotus. It's a vlogging channel, and we talked about how important an e-collar can be in a dog's life, how it can open up the dog's freedom, how it can give them more and more freedom. And that's really what you are doing. Training a dog gives the dog the freedom that they wouldn't have if they're untrained, right? If a dog can't stay in your proximity or can't be, Enzo and Lotus, yes, Riley, I hope I said that right, then they can't have freedom. If a dog can't be recalled to you, it can't be out without a leash. I see people walking their dogs off leash all the time. People ask me, how do I feel about it? And I tell them, look, if you can correct your dog, if you can control your dog off leash, I've got no problem with it. I don't care if your dog's on leash or not, but I'm going to tell you something. Most people cannot control their dog properly, right? Not under a distraction. And then it always comes down to it, like he's never done that before. Just because a dog has never done that before is probably because you didn't set the dog up in the proper way to experience that. A good trainer will set up a dog for something. In other words, put a stake outside of the front door, open the door, and see if the dog runs out the front door. Have somebody walking a dog or playing with a tennis ball in front and see if the dog will run out the front door, right? Just opening the door with no distractions and the dog not going out doesn't mean the dog is not trained to run out the front door. You must add distractions. Distractions are the key to successful dog training. For a dog to stay on a focused heel with somebody when there's no distractions, there's no issue. There's zero issue of it. But when we introduce distractions, the cat, the squirrel, the child on a bicycle, the skateboard, the little dog on a leash barking at your dog. You've seen videos of Goofy lying down with another dog lunging and barking at him, and he doesn't move because he knows he's been trained like that, right? Good training takes into account the distractions that will probably trigger the dog. Bad training doesn't introduce those distractions. They just show, it's kind of like, the magician who shows you the trick, and then you say, no, the coin's in the other hand. He goes, yeah, but pretend you didn't see that. You can't pretend you didn't see it because you saw it, because it was a bad trick. The magician did it wrong. So when you're training a dog, you need to focus on the basics where we don't use corrections at all, right? We focus on luring and shaping a behavior. And this is the point at which I say we keep giving the dog treats. And people say, well, how long am I supposed to give my dog treats? You give your dog the treats until the dog expects a treat every time. And then you go beyond that, because then you give the dog a treat even beyond the part of where he expects it, because now he's just doing the behavior because he's brainwashed into doing it. Then you remove the treat and you give him a reward, praise, a ball, a pat on the head, or whatever. Then you introduce distractions. When you introduce distractions, then you introduce your corrections. Your corrections will give you the tool to work past the hurdles. Without that, you're toast. You're just toast. And by the way, there's people who will, do obedience with their dogs and do protection with their dogs and do this and do that. I'm not talking about just that. I'm talking about, I show a lot of competitive obedience on my site, right? I mean, because I think it's fun. I show it in a fun context. I've titled Goofy, in 3 different obedience to the top level. But that's not what it's about, right? Most of you don't tune in because you're looking for that. Well, the reason you tune in is because my experience with a vast variety of dogs, of different behaviors. I've trained dogs of almost every behavior. I mean, I'd probably say every behavior and almost every breed, hundreds of breeds. I understand that. The reason I try to make a difference with dogs is because I understand the simplicity of doing this. It's so simple. Training a dog is as simple as making what you want them to do a positive experience and what you don't want them to do a negative experience. And you're going to set them up for it. You're going to trick them. And that's how you win. So I'm going to look for a couple of questions here. Let's see here. Get my mouse over here. I know some of you guys came in. I saw Anthony came in. I saw Manny, you came in. Donald, you're here. Doug, you're here. Riley, you're here. I don't know. Let's see. Here's a question. Jeanette, I think I can add this to the chat. Here we go. How do you determine the tool you use first in adhesive? And I think you mean aversive situations. So what I do is, because of my knowledge in having done it so many times, I kind of pick a tool that I think is going to work for the dog. So some dogs really work well with prong collars. Some dogs flip out on prong collars. So before I ever see the aversive, right, before I see the need for the correction, I want to determine what's going to work on the dog. For example, a basic slip lead is going to work on just about every dog, right? Just about every dog. But a prong collar and an e-collar work differently. Some dogs work great on prong collars, horrible on e-collars. Some dogs work great on e-collars and horrible on prong collars. Some dogs work great on an e-collar on the vibrate mode. Some can't stand the vibrate. If I put the vibrate mode on Goofy, it freaks him out. He has no idea. But if I put the stim mode, the electric stim mode, it works on him. So taking that tool away from somebody is the problem, right? That's where people always make the issue worse, because they end up being pigeonholed into one thing, right? Some dogs, if you give them food and they're excited, it makes them nutty, it makes them more crazy. Some dogs, if you add a prong collar, it calms them down. Some, it jacks them up. But that's what you have to know. Okay, Colt, that's an interesting question. Is a female or male dog harder trained than the other? And it always, always, always depends on the dog, always. Here's one from Shepherd's Daily Lives. Resource guarding with toys, Dutch Shepherd, best way to overcome. So most of the time, when you get into these issues, if it's a young dog, and I don't know because you didn't say, the dog is, and again, a dog like a Dutchie is going to be naturally resource guarding, Malinois, working line German Shepherds, because it's an ingrained behavior that we want in the dog. Like in other words, you're going to use your Dutchie for Mondy or ring sport, he's going to do an object guard. And if he already has that natural tendency, it's a lot easier to teach him that exercise. So he may have been bred for those kind of behaviors. The way we get rid of possessive behaviors is by establishing a better relationship with the dog. The dog must listen to sit, must listen to down. So in other words, if I tell the dog down, and then I go to reach for the toy and he goes to lunge at me or growl at me, he's not listening to the down. So I haven't done the foundational training. Focus on your foundational training before you focus on anything else. Okay, this is a good question here. Just wanted to ask what the proper way to correct an overly excited dog who likes to jump up on people when she meets them or when we go to a place she knows she's having too much fun. From my mouth. This usually happens because the dog sees the people immediately focusing on them. So if I take my dog out and everybody goes, oh, look, you got a dog, and they give the dog that attention, that excitement from the person is then reciprocated by the dog, and the dog jumps up on them. Later on, the dog has it so ingrained in their mind that people are there to meet them that they assume that position and they'll start jumping them to get that behavior. The best thing you can do with the dog is teach the dog a solid sit or down, and have people at a distance. Have the people not look at the dog. So that if the dog is sitting or downing and the people are talking to you, the dog's not feeling any pressure to interact with them, and then that usually makes it go away. Okay, Justin, this question here says, I have a Shepherd Chow mix that's great with my wife and I, but is reactive towards men that visit our home. What kind of correction would you recommend? Well, first of all, this is the important part, right? So it's not always about correcting the dog unless the dog knows that they're doing something wrong. So, for example, if you have a Shepherd Chow, that's a really interesting mix. It's a very difficult mix in ways because you've probably not given the dog the structure. In other words, if I had the dog, I would put the dog in a crate and I would have people coming in and out of the house not paying any attention to the dog. Then I would put the dog on a downstay or a place command. And then I would have people coming in and out. I'd have a leash on the dog, obviously. But I would teach the dog that the people who are coming into the house don't interact with the dog. And I'd have them on the downstay. Now, if I put him on a downstay, let's say on like a raised platform, a bed or something like that, and he gets off of that, I would correct him for getting off of the place. Not for lunging at the person, but for getting off the place. The correction for lunging at the person is secondary because he didn't listen to your primary command, which is not getting off the place, which is not staying on the place. So you need to work about that, and you'll see. Okay, I'm not talking about Chihuahuas. I'm not talking about any breed specific right now. Okay, thank you for that, Brocco. Very nice. If you do, this is my first plug for my channel, robertcabral.com. Tons of full length. The video lesson this week dealing with just building engagement with an Alano Espanol, which is a very, very dominant dog. It's a Mollisher type breed. It's a half-hour lesson. You're not going to ever see that here on my YouTube channel. Arvid says, how to make distinction between distraction and disobedience while training in a new environment. Well, distractions are things you add to the table. Disobedience is the dog's behavior of not doing the obedience. It's a big, big, big difference. Okay, Narayan says, my dog is always pulling. I use a martingale collar. I correct him, but he still won't stop. Well, more than likely, he doesn't understand the leash pressure. You might consider using a prong collar. Watch my videos, in particular my membership section, on how to introduce a prong collar to a dog, how to introduce leash pressure to the dog, because you don't want to start yanking the dog around. Okay, here's a great question. I'm assuming you're Japanese because I can't, Mangani. Anyway, or maybe not, Nikateko. It's a very cool name, whatever it is. Anyway, you say, can corrections help with fearful dogs to get them more calm? Mine is always jumpy at everything. So no, right? If you have a fearful dog and you start correcting the dog for doing something wrong, you're more than likely to make the dog more fearful. And that's really, really, really important. So you need to first teach the dog what you want. That's primary. Teach the dog what you want the dog to do, then introduce the distraction at a distance, and then introduce your correction so that it'll be more fair to the dog. That's really, really, really important. Okay, Nicholas, we've talked quite a bit. Let me see. The correction should match the infraction. Is this always true? I've started correcting heavy for small disobedience, so my GSD can negotiate with commands big or small. What do you think? I wouldn't correct heavy for small disobedience because it doesn't, if you become punitive, right? You become very petty to your dog. And then like if Goofy does something like, I'll give you a great example. Every time we go for a walk in the morning, Janet will have her dogs nicely leashed up because she's very, very, very good with that, very anal. I am anal on other things, but on like getting the dogs, and I say, okay, let's get a leash and let's go for a walk. Goofy will always go into the bucket, Dwayne's bucket, and pull out a bumper, always. Now, I could get really angry with him and go, hey, I told you not to do that, da, 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 da. But I don't. I go, hey, come on, knock it off. And the punishment should always suit the crime. That's just, that's just the way it is. All right, here, Manny, one of my students from Bound Angels. How do you get people to understand that they need to set up their dog in practice before expecting a certain behavior in the moment? And that's the million-dollar question, Manny, because what happens is, people expect dogs to know things in all environments, right? And I'm just going to talk about in an environment. So people will always say, if I meet them at the park with their dog, they'll say, well, he doesn't do that at home. That's normal for people to do, right? Because they think if a dog knows it with no distractions, that they can do it with distractions. I'll give you a great example. You, for example, Manny, maybe you, I don't know, but I'm saying whoever's watching, you may know the Pledge of Allegiance. I would hope you would. But let's say I said to you, say the Pledge of Allegiance to me, for me. And you said it. And then I started slapping you in the face and say, now say the Pledge of Allegiance. You might get distracted. Now, if I put you on a stage in front of, let's say Dodger Stadium or something, or Yankee Stadium, and I asked you to say the Pledge of Allegiance in front of 50,000 people, you might not be able to know it. So remember, your dog only knows what he knows in the situation he knows it. You need to introduce it in various situations, and you need to make sure that people, like your clients here, Manny, you got to explain it to them, right? A great example for you, Manny, because you're a fellow martial artist. You know how to do a sidekick. You know how to do a sidekick. You know how to do a sidekick. But can you do that sidekick when somebody is coming at you with a bow, right? Or there's two people coming at you? It changes, and as the stress factors increase in a dog, or the distraction factor or the prey drive increases in a dog, their ability to concentrate on what they know decreases. That's really, really important. So Lazzie here, that's a great question. What's the proper way to correct a dog in the presence of other dogs for aggression? You must, first and foremost, you must correct the dog at a distance, and the dog must be corrected for the infraction of not listening to you. So if I tell the dog, hey, sit, and the dog walks by, and then the dog lunges, I'm correcting the dog for not sitting. Then I'm just going to do some movement exercises, and the dog is not following the movement, the dog gets distracted for that. That is primary before I ever correct the dog for the infraction of aggression towards the other dog. I correct the dog for not paying attention to me. I always put myself between the dog and their infraction, what they're doing wrong, because I want it to be about my relationship with him, not as much his relationship with the other dog. Oh, look, Janet's here. See, Dwayne says woof. That's fantastic. Thank you. And honey, I texted you to see how you guys were doing at the agility match. I just told everybody Janet's doing agility. She got, by the way, kudos to Janet. First place yesterday with Dwayne. That's really amazing. She's doing really great work with him. I'm very proud of her, and I love you guys very, very much. Okay, Riley, ready to say hi. So let's see. Okay, you guys got your conversation going to. So here's a great point that Riley's saying. It does. It takes thousands of repetitions for a dog to generalize, to just get it. But it takes us, there's a story, there's all these different numbers. It takes us so many times to get a movement to be natural. Playing a guitar is a great example. To understand the chords, to be able to switch between the chords, those are movements that we repeat over and over again. And it's imperative that you understand when I talk about the use of luring. In other words, we lure the dog so many times, adding in the verbal cue to the lure. We do it so many times that the dog is now generalizing that he's going to get a reward for following this movement, for doing, and following the movement is following the verbal cue of going into that position. The more he repeats that, it becomes so second nature that when I now remove the reward, the behavior stays. It's critical to understand that. Don't remove the rewards too soon. Because if you do, first of all, you never remove the rewards altogether, right? You never remove the rewards altogether. You keep the rewards in, you just change the duration. Maybe you don't reward him every single time. Maybe you don't lure him as much. Maybe it goes from a lure to a reward, and from a reward to an intermittent reward, and from an intermittent reward to an end jackpot reward. That's really, really, it's just like something funny. I see 111 thumbs up and 1 thumb down. How stupid does that person have to feel for doing that 1 thumb down? I mean, you stand out like a sore thumb. Anyway, all right. Okay, here's a good question. Rajdeep, how to correct a 5-month-old Rot when he's off leash and just free in the house doing something I don't want? Well, if he's a 5-month-old dog, he's probably going to be doing a lot of things you don't want. So what you want to do is contain him into an area where he can do less wrong than right. So contain him in a little X-pen or in his crate. Crates are great for that. I love crates. You're welcome, Manny. But you can't just expect, you can't be petty, right? You can't let a 5-month-old puppy go running around the house and then he pulls something off the counter and you're yelling at him. You can't do that. That's not fair to the dog. Really highly unfair to the dog, actually. Let's see. Okay, here, Jacob Ball. From what age should we start correcting a dog? So I always talk about this. Corrections are not a bad thing, but you don't need to introduce them too soon. When you're in the early stages with a dog, all you're doing is luring and shaping, right? You're teaching the down, you're teaching the stand, you're teaching the come, you're teaching the leave it, you're teaching the stay, you're teaching the go out, you're teaching whatever it is. And all the actions that don't get rewards are things the dog is going to do away with, right? And if the reward is a negative reward, like a smack on the face or a poke in the rib or they say a sharp stick in the eye, I'm just using it figuratively. Those are things the dog doesn't want, but you don't want to be punitive about it. Corrections come in when the dog, and I don't know what age it is, maybe it's 6 months or so, but they come in when the dog knows what I expect and chooses not to do it, right? Whether that's in the face of a distraction or not, but the dog must know what I want and make the conscious choice not to do it. Okay, the biggest reason I don't like e-collars is because so many people screw up the timing, long leashes, all these. Well, long leash is a great way to do it. Long leashes are great. But just because somebody screws up, I could say that's why I hate guitars, because people play them out of tune. It has nothing to do with it, right? I mean, I understand an e-collar used improperly and with bad timing. And by the way, bad timing can be used on a long line too. Bad timing can be used with delivering a treat. It's a lot worse when it's used on something like an e-collar, right? But that's not, and that might be a reason for you not to like it or for you to choose not to teach it to your clients, but it's not a reason to ban the tool. And that's what I'm saying. Banning the tool is where I've got the issue, right? It's where I have the issue. Doug, you don't have to leave. I understand you get a little upset with people doing that, but just hang tight and just don't read the comments. Just look at my face here. I'm keeping everything so calm and so going. Kim, what did you introduce a prong? If you're doing it, now, okay, Janet did a super chat for $4.99. That's very, very nice, but isn't that amazing? That's very sweet. And I think she did it to just get me to look there, to look there. And I can't even super chat it back to her. I would. I'd super chat her back $5.99. But at about 6 months, you can start introducing a prong, but introduce it positively. Whenever I introduce a prong, if I take a prong collar out, you can see my dogs get super, 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 super happy about it. So, but yeah, about 6 months. That's very funny, Spots. Okay, so this is a really common problem. How do you stop a puppy biting the leash very excited while walking? If I pull, it becomes a game of tug of war. If I ask to sit or down for a bit of time, it works. Sometimes he gets right back. You can use 2 leashes, right, and give the dog some pops. Go, hey, knock it off. But the more you tug on the leash he's got in his mouth, the more you're engaging that. Sometimes what I'll do with the dog is I'll just give him a little scruff on the neck and say, hey, knock it off. And I'll take it out of his mouth. Then I'll pet him calmly. Good boy. Give him a treat. Easy. And I'll walk. Be careful when the dog starts to bounce all over the place. You might just use some treats and lure the dog along on the walk because it'll be a lot easier. Okay, thanks, Marika. I didn't realize that it was there before. Okay, here. You guys got to see. Is that the prettiest picture of Janet with Jimmy there too? Okay. How to do corrections inside home when the dog is off leash without using an e-collar. So, Raphael, that's a great question. You shouldn't be doing these kind of corrections on a dog. And I don't know. I'm guessing here. What kind of corrections those might be. I don't know what you might be doing to the dog that requires corrections, but it's rare that I would use an e-collar correction in a home. The reason I use e-collars is because it allows me to correct the dog twofold. One, at a distance away from me, and 2, without the dog assuming the correction is coming from me. This is where e-collars are so brilliant. It allows me to give what I call a hand of God correction, that the dog will think that the dog's action is correcting it as opposed to me. If the dog thinks I'll give you a great example. If the dog thinks it's me controlling the e-collar when he is at a distance to me, there's a high likelihood that the dog will choose to go away from me and not come back to me. And that's what I don't want to do, okay? Okay, somebody says in favor of Jen's question. I don't know what Jen's question is, though. So, okay, what's this here? Jakob. I like your balance training. I'm waiting for my puppy, but want to be prepared as possible. That breeds like Border Collie or Australian Shepherd do not react well to corrections. No, all dogs react well. All animals, all beings, right? I mean, I don't know about slugs or maybe octopuses too. If you haven't seen that movie, My Octopus Teacher, please see that. It's a really beautiful documentary on Netflix. All dogs will respond to corrections. It's the severity of the correction that's going to get you in trouble, right? That's where people make the mistake, because some dogs like Aussies or Border Collies are softer dogs and will shy away from corrections, where dogs like Malinois, Rottweilers, working line Mastiffs do the opposite. When they get a correction, they'll challenge, they'll rise up. And that's when people get really confused. They tell the dog, hey, no, knock it off. And then the dog challenges them, right? So you have one of those 2 options. If you balance it, then it's fine. All right, let's see. How to train a timid puppy? Build confidence in the dog, first and foremost. Daniel Moore, what do you say to people when they give you a dirty look or comment, I live in a city? Well, I'm going to tell you something. The greatest thing in life is that you have a choice, right? People can give me a dirty look and cannot agree with me, right? Just because somebody doesn't agree with me doesn't make my position right or their position right. It's a disagreement. It would be really, if my dog was doing something and I gave him a pop and say, hey, don't do that. And the person might say, well, I wouldn't do it that way. That's one thing. But if you see somebody taking a puppy and kicking it down the street, everybody could agree that that is incorrect. So a disagreement or a matter of opinion, that's just one thing. I don't care. I really don't care what people think of me. I don't dress to impress people. I don't speak to impress people. I don't buy things, drive cars. I don't do anything like that to impress people. So, okay, let's see. John, thank you for that. And Akita is a good dog for the right owner. So please give that dog a lot of training. My friend's just about to get one. Okay, so you said how to train a dog who is super scared to walk on a road because scared of people and noise, but super cool inside the house. Well, you've got to get that dog outside. You've got to get this dog outside, or you're going to have a complete neurosis of a dog. I would take the dog and get it outside, start feeding it outside maybe at a distance to people, at a distance to sound, and then you will you'll have a much better dog. Okay, this is a very good comment, N7, that's a really good one. Let's see. Okay, this is probably the most common question again. How long realistically should formal training sessions last with your dog? This is probably one of the most common questions I get. I'm gonna break it down for you. For most dogs, and this would be a super high percentage of dogs, you should be training your dog for 15 minutes at a time. That's it. Ask Janet. I take Goofy out, we do a couple things, and I put him away. Right? He can hang out with me and do whatever, but training, and ongoing training should not last longer than 15 minutes, because if it does, the dog will break down. The dog won't get it. There was a study back when I was teaching karate where they showed that children learn better in 20-minute spurts. And Jan and I were discussing this the other day, where these really more advanced levels of training have children standing up and building things and doing things with their hands and all that stuff. And they notice that children learn better, right? And I think there's a lot of validation and truth to that. The problem is people overdo it with their dog, and then the dog starts to shut down. So the shorter you keep your sessions, 10 to 15 minutes, 3 times a day, the more successful your training will be. Let's see here. Let's see. You guys are okay. You guys have a lot of questions here that you guys are talking amongst each other so much. Okay, here, this is a great one. Littermate syndrome. This doesn't really have anything to do with corrections, but I'm going to tell you something. Littermate syndrome is horrible. It's real. Getting 2 dogs from the same litter is the hugest mistake you'll make when you get your dogs, if you choose to have a bond with either one of those dogs. It's not going to happen. Furthermore, even when you get dogs that are of similar age, within, let's say, 6 months or 8 months of each other, and you get them early on, there will be a problem. The best thing you can do is get a dog, have a solid relationship with it, have that dog for at least a year before you get another dog. Okay, Musad says, your dog training skills are awesome. I love your videos. I started doing leash training inside and also in the front yard. Then just 10 meters away from my house on the road. Okay, that's fantastic. That's the way you kind of start to break it down, right? That's really, really important. And that's true right there. Okay, so Sam, how can you get your verbal correction actually mean something to your dog? So dogs communicate less verbally and more spatially. So in other words, dogs get in each other's faces. Dogs get in each other's spaces and faces. They will bite each other on the neck. They'll growl at each other, and that's really the only verbal communication that they get from each other. But you will see that if you have more than one dog, how dogs communicate. They'll just walk up to each other, they'll give a look or whatever. You need a physical add-on to your verbal correction. So in other words, you just tell the dog no, and there's no repercussion to that. There's no follow-up. In other words, with me, if I say no, no means something physical is coming, a pop on a leash, or a stim on the collar, or anything like that. That teaches the dog to listen to the no, which then prevents the further of the physical. That's really, really, really important. I'm not talking about spay and neuter, so I don't want to get into that. Okay, this might be a great question. And yeah, by the way, if you put a question mark in front of your question like Kate did here, then it's easy for me to know it's a question and I'll actually read it. Because if it's not, it might just be a comment for you when you're talking back and forth with somebody else here in the chat, which I don't mind you doing. Right? I got no problem with that. Do I have any concerns about e-collars being so widely available without training? I've taken lessons from Robin McFarlane and you, two of the best, and I still worry about doing it right. Well, I'll tell you this. There are so many things available widely that can be misused that the e-collar certainly might be on that list. But my bigger concern is, again, look, I don't buy my e-collars from Petco because they have just crap quality, right? There's nothing but crap quality e-collars that they're going to have there. The e-collars I buy are very expensive. But the point isn't that they're not available. The point is that the less available they become, the more stigmatic they become. Just like the more people I see using them incorrectly, the more stigmatic they become, right? You must understand that any tool, I mean, what if somebody took the end of a leash and just beat a dog with it until the dog was bleeding? Would we say illegalize leashes, or would we say put that person in jail for animal abuse? There's the crux of the issue, right? You can do more damage to your dog with your hand than you can with an e-collar. I promise you can do that. But it's not a reason to illegalize using your hand. It's a perfect reason to illegalize the action of the abuse, not the tool of the abuse. Right? I mean, I could get into like an issue with guns and stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. All right, let's see. If there's a question mark in front of it, I know it's going to be a question. Okay, I'm going to do this one because I think, okay, oh, you're a golfer. Jan and I are golfers. I'm going to answer it for you. 3-month-old working GSD puppy is barking at large dogs she walks by, and her hair stands up. I tug on a leash, getting her to come back to me and give her a sit command. So what you want to be careful of that is not getting the dog to have a negative association with those dogs. And if you pop her too much in that situation, she's going to think, oh, there's something wrong with those dogs. She's going to put a stigma on those dogs. I'm using the word stigma a lot today, I noticed that. But what you really want to do here is you want to, if she looks at them and like her hackles come up, the hair on the back of her comes up, just call her, go, hey, get her over to you, play tug with her, get her to think that seeing those dogs, something good is going to happen. Try to make it more of a positive, especially with a young pup. And what I would try to do is I would try to find somebody who's got, if you're going to an IPO club, somebody who's got an older working line shepherd that can maybe play with her a little bit, and she can kind of growl at it, and he or she can play with her to make it a positive experience. She should definitely know that it's not a negative things. Let's see. Still looking for question marks. Yeah, there's Goofy back there. He's oh my God, look at him back there. Is that funny or what? He's got his head resting back there. Okay, here's a great question. So, if you're going to get a dog that's that small, you're going to have to correct it like you'd correct a gerbil or something, because it's not a real dog. I mean, I hate to say that to you. You cannot do, you can't do correction on these tiny dogs. I mean, you just can't do it. You're going to hurt the dog. It's just not going to happen. Okay, Nicholas, training duration. What if you go for a long walk and do, you can do obedience, but then it's not a training session, right? A formal training session is 10 to 15 minutes of repeating behaviors, and it's complete focused behavior. Adding obedience to your walk is great. You can do that all day long. But there's also, like I told you this in one of our consults, is you have to give the dog free time, right? The dog has to have time to just be a dog, just do this, just lay down and do absolutely nothing. That's really, really, really important. again, if you have a question, put 2 question marks in front. Okay, here's a question that, okay, I see a question mark underneath 2 of them actually. I'm going to answer this one first. What correction tools are recommended for someone who lives in the UK where most of the collars are banned? You're going to have to do the same work with a long line and just, a chain collar, just a regular collar. And I'll tell you, all these tools, right now in some places in Europe, I think Switzerland or Sweden, I think it's Switzerland, they're banning choke chains, the constricting chains, and they'll put a link on it. So these people are really screwing up so much with dogs. All these radical people on dog training tools and positive only stuff are just completely screwing up dogs. So you guys got to vote these people out. Okay, I got a couple questions. Okay, okay, Riley, I'm going to answer yours first. Okay, which e-collars to use? I like e-collar technologies, but right now, in my membership section, there is a great video. It's an old one on modifying the Garmin, the Delta Sport XC, which is the one I use personally, to being the way I use it. I like that collar a lot. I like the remote e-collar technologies. I know Greg, the owner, he does a really great job on the collars. They're less expensive, really good quality stuff. He's making some smaller collars. I was working with him on an idea I had, so we'll see if that happens. How can I train a 1.5-year-old terrier mixed to walk nicely on a harness and leash? Because of medical issues, he cannot be on any type of collar. Every trainer I see only covers walk on. Well, I'll tell you what I would consider doing with this dog. That's a great question. So if he has some issues where he can't be on a collar because maybe he has some cervical issues or something like that, perhaps he could be on an e-collar and you could use a vibration or a low stim mode, and this would be a great use. Here's a great use for an e-collar because it would give the dog a communication. And I mean, if I had an e-collar here, I could show you, but maybe I'll do another live just on e-collars. And I can show you that I can put it on my neck and I can stim it low and I can stim it high. It's your choice how to use it. It's your choice. It's your choice when you get in your car, whether you're going to go to the hospital and bring flowers to the children or the people who are alone, or if you're going to take your car and drive it through a crowd and kill people. The tool is the tool. The decision of how to use the tool is what's up to you. And that can be anything, right? I can take a knife and I can stab somebody, or I can take a knife and I can prepare food. Any tool has a positive use and a negative use. And guys, I got to end it on that because I just realized it's 1 o'clock and I'm doing my live in the member section. So I'm sorry, I got to go. I love you guys very much. Please consider joining the member section and at robertcabral.com. See you there. And in fact, if you're a member, run over there now. I'll be there in about a minute.